Welcome to Prophecy Countdown with author and pastor Kenneth Baer. Join us every week for the latest updates on what the Bible has to say about the events, the characters, and prophetic signs of the return of Jesus Christ and His coming kingdom. Make sure you not only subscribe, but like your favorite episodes and share it with your friends. Now, on with the broadcast.
Welcome to Prophecy Countdown. I'm Pastor Ken, and welcome to today's Prophecy Update. Today's message is number 479, It Must Happen. Our episodes premiere on multiple video and audio channels on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. and then on Sundays at 1 p.m. We welcome your comments, your questions, and any ideas you may have about future episodes. Just send us your questions at our email, prophecycountdownpodcast@gmail.com. So let's get into today's teaching, number 479, It Must Happen. It's the middle of the night. The garden is quiet, the air is still. Jesus had just finished praying. He was anguished, yet also surrendered. Gethsemane, this beautiful, peaceful olive grove, has been a place of rest for Jesus and his disciples for almost 3 years. It was a meeting place, a special meeting place between the Son and the Father. But now that peace is shattered. A mob is approaching, armed with swords and clubs, with their torches flickering in the darkness. Roman soldiers, temple guards, religious leaders, and at the front of it all, Judas. Peter senses the danger immediately. His master, his rabbi, his closest friend is under threat. Acting on instinct, Peter pulls out his sword and he strikes, cutting off the ear of the high priest's servant. Chaos erupts, but Jesus, calm and under control, says, "Peter, put your sword away." Now we know from John's gospel that Jesus healed the man, restoring his ear. This wasn't just any night. Let's set the scene. This is what we know as Holy Week. Earlier that evening, Jesus had shared what we know as the Last Supper with his disciples in the upper room. He had broken bread, he poured the wine, shared that as well, and revealed that one of his disciples, would betray him. They sang a hymn, probably from the Hallel, praising God, even as this shadow is beginning to overtake them. Then they walked from Jerusalem, about 1.5 miles, 1.3 miles east across the Kidron Valley, to the Garden of Gethsemane. There, Jesus had prayed 3 times, "Not my will, but yours be done." And now, as the mob closes in, the moment had finally come. Today, the title of my message is number 479, It Must Happen. And we'll be looking at just 6 verses in the 26th chapter of Matthew. I just brought you up to date. Matthew has brought us to the very hour that Jesus was betrayed with a kiss. So let's go ahead and read these 6 verses, beginning in verse 51 of chapter 26 of the Gospel of Matthew. "And suddenly," Matthew writes, "one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword, struck the servant of the high priest, and cut off his ear. But Jesus said to him, 'Put your sword in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Or do you think that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he will provide me with more than 12 legions of angels? How then could the scriptures be fulfilled, that it must happen thus?' In that hour, Jesus said to the multitudes, 'Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to take me? I sat daily with you teaching in the temple, and you did not seize me. But all of this was done that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all of the disciples forsook him and fled." So let's take this passage again today. We'll take it verse by verse. It's an amazing passage. Some of the very last words of Jesus. We'll take it typically a couple verses at a time. Matthew writes, for example, at the very beginning, he says, "And suddenly one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword, struck the servant of the high priest, and cut off his ear." Now we know from the Gospel of John, chapter 18, that this was Peter that drew his sword, and the servant's name was Malchus. Peter, ever impetuous, acts in the flesh. I think Peter is still clinging to this misguided expectation that Jesus would soon rise up and take a leadership position in a revolt against Rome or take control in some way. Peter acts as if he can help accomplish God's plan through human strength. What makes this moment even more interesting is that Jesus had earlier told them, the disciples, to bring swords. We see that in the Gospel of Luke. Luke chapter 22, Jesus says, "But now he who has a money bag, let him take it. And he who has no sword, let him sell his garment to buy one." They replied, "Look, Lord, there are 2 swords." And he, that's Jesus, said, "It is enough." Now, Jesus wasn't preparing them for a violent upraising when he said it's enough. He was actually ending the conversation. He was warning them of the danger to come, not instructing them to fight at the time of his arrest. So when Peter responds and pulls his sword, Jesus immediately responds, "Put your sword in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword." You see, that's not pacifism. That's purpose. Jesus knew there was a plan. He knew the path to the cross could not be altered by swords or defended by violence. Let's continue. Verse 53, Jesus says, "Or do you think that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he will provide me with more than 12 legions of angels?" So here's the thing. I did a little research. A Roman legion was around 6,000 soldiers. 12 legions would be 72,000. Not Roman soldiers, but angels. 72,000 angels. You know, one angel could have been enough. In 2 Kings, we read the story about Hezekiah and when Jerusalem was under attack by the Assyrian army. And one angel of the Lord struck down 185,000 Assyrians in a single night. Yet Jesus tells us that he could summon 12 legions. You see, Jesus had the power. He had the authority. He had the right. But Jesus chose surrender. Jesus surrenders. He could have chosen to use his army of angels, but he doesn't. That's not the plan. You see, it must happen this way. So let's continue. Verse 54, Jesus says, "How could then the scriptures be fulfilled that it must happen thus?" That's the New King James. In the New Living Translation, it reads, "But if I did summon 12 legions of angels," Jesus is saying, "how would the scriptures be fulfilled that described what must happen now?" The verse takes us straight back to Jesus' prayer in Gethsemane. Jesus prayed, "Father, if it is possible, take this cup from me, but nevertheless, your will be done." You see, Jesus had prayed, and the Father didn't answer. There is no plan B. There was only the plan. The scriptures had spoken. The prophets had foretold it. The Messiah would be betrayed. That's out of Psalm 41:9. It says betrayed by a friend. The Messiah would be sold for 30 pieces of silver. That's Zechariah chapter 11. The Messiah would be silent before his accusers. That's Isaiah chapter 53. And again, Isaiah 53 tells us later that he would be pierced for our transgressions. You know, Jesus wasn't being swept away by forces beyond his control. He was walking in obedience to what must happen. He was walking in obedience to the scriptures. Let's continue with today's message, verse 55. "In that hour, Jesus said to the multitudes, 'Have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to take me? I sat daily with you teaching in the temple, and you did not seize me.'" You know, Jesus is speaking to the crowd. This would have included officials from the temple, guards, and likely some members of the Sanhedrin, with, of course, Judas at the beginning, at the head. And now, as this crowd traveled with their swords and their torches at night from the temple to Gethsemane, they would have gathered a crowd. A crowd gathered, curious, stirred by rumors, and just looking to see what's going to happen. So Jesus highlights this absurdity. He speaks to the crowd. He says, "Why are you coming like this with weapons under cover of night?" He had been teaching daily in the temple. Jesus didn't hide from the truth. He didn't hide from who he was, but now they act as though he were a criminal. You see, the crowd was attracted to his fame, but now, even with the whisper of an arrest, they will abandon him. You see, here's the thing we can learn, and we know this, that crowds are fickle. Public opinion shifts quickly with every news cycle. Today's heroes easily become tomorrow's goats. Okay, let's finish up. Verse 56. Jesus says, "But all of this, all of his 3 years, the arrest, the betrayal, the coming trial, his crucifixion, all of this," Jesus says, "was done that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled." And then Matthew adds this commentary, "Then all the disciples forsook him and fled." There it is. The key to everything, Jesus said. All of this was done so that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. The betrayal, the arrest, the false accusations, the trial, the crucifixion, all of this had to happen. And why did it have to happen? Because God's word had already declared it. You see, when God's word declares something, it must come to pass. The scriptures, my friends, are the dividing line between what's true and what's false. The scriptures are the dividing line between the crowd and the committed. The scriptures are the dividing line between fear and faith. The scriptures continue to be our foundation. They have to be fulfilled because God knows the end from the beginning. There's a saying, He said it and we believe it. And it came to pass. You see, even before the resurrection, even before the cross, we already had enough to believe in who Jesus was because it was a fulfillment of the scriptures. So let's recap. What have we learned? Why didn't Jesus resist? Why didn't he fight? Why didn't he call the angels? Because the scriptures had to be fulfilled. Jesus surrendered to the will of the Father, and because there was no other way, because this was the way, it must happen this way. And we all thank God that it did.
Nearly every day, it's common to see, read, or hear something about the end of the world, the apocalypse, or end times. Author and pastor Kenneth Baer's The Apocalypse and Coming Kingdom zooms in and breaks down biblical prophecy as it relates to Jesus' imminent return and the coming 7-year period, including the Great Tribulation. Available in both paperback and Kindle versions. Get your copy on Amazon or at Barnes & Noble and select Christian bookstores. The title again is The Apocalypse and Coming Kingdom. You can also find it listed by author Kenneth Baer. Get your copy today. Thank you for joining us on Prophecy Countdown with Pastor Ken Baer. Don't leave without first sharing the latest episode with your friends. Be sure to join us again for the latest updates on Prophecy Countdown.